Assalamu alaikum all. It's Dr. Arabella back again with you with the third episode of LCI, where we have talked about in our previous episodes about some background history of the development of lean canvas invention. And in episode number 2, we have also learned the process of the LCI. Today's focus would be on a single component of the LCI. So we are going to see the LCI in more depth today. I shared with you that LCI is divided in 11 components, and that 11 components in fact are starting with the first component of problem identification. The idea for today's video is to talk about the problem identification component in more depth. But for all of the components of the LCI, we have certain questions, the checklists, and hands-on activities. With the help of those hands-on activities, an academic inventor or an entrepreneur can answer those questions which are raised by multiple components. So in today's video, I will focus on the questions and the checklist that is being discussed under the problem identification component. As I mentioned already, that of course it also had hands-on activities, but those hands-on activities will be a part of our next episode. In episode 3, I'll be sharing you the box or the component for the problem identification, what 3 questions it asks from an academic inventor, and what is its supportive checklist. So let us start with the questions of the problem identification. Let's have a closer look.
Okay, so let us start with the first question of the problem identification component. The first question asks, what real-world practical problem or unmet need will be solved or met by the proposed invention? Question number 2 asks, what role stakeholders, end users, industrial experts, inventors, collaborators, policymakers, federal or provincial organizations, and others may perform in identifying the real-world practical problem? Question number 3 asks, what standards and regulations exist within industry and what impact these involve on the real-world practical problem?
The questions that we have discussed, which are raised by problem identification component, need answer from an academic inventor and entrepreneur. And it is expected when the answer of all these 3 questions will be depicted by the academic inventors, the research proposal will develop gradually. In order to support these 3 questions, the LCI proposes Checklist 1. When all the items of the checklist will be considered by the academic inventors or entrepreneurs, gradually they will be going closer for the identification of their real-world practical problem. Let us understand or let's learn what is the first item in LCI Checklist 1. The first item of the LCI Checklist 1 asks about identification of a real-world practical problem. Let's take a few examples. We are surrounded by many real-world practical problems. Suppose energy crisis, water scarcity, global warming, cyber threats, road traffic safety. They all can be considered as a real-world practical problem. So what an academic inventor or an entrepreneur need to understand first that what real-world practical problem his invention is going to solve. The second item in the LCI Checklist 1 asks about incident, event, or conditions causing and characterizing the real-world practical problem. Let's try to learn it with the help of certain examples. There was a guy and who was driving motorbike. He had an accident, and as a result of his accident, he had a head injury and he was hospitalized for the treatment. While he was in the hospital, he started observing that along with his, there were several other who has same kind of head injury when they were driving the motorbike. That incident of his life made him think that there are certain safety parameters which must be incorporated or must be required if they want most of the people to remain safe from the motorbike accidents and the head injuries. And do you know, as a resultant, he came up with a design of safety helmet, and later on that safety helmet got patented. Nowadays, if you see that people are talking about new advanced driver assistant systems where cars will be driverless and ultimately reduces the risk on the roads. The third item in the LCI checklist 1 talks about motivation and justification of the proposed invention for solving the real world practical problem. I remember I was a judge and a student came here and he started talking about his business model. He came up with an idea that there is an electricity problem and he is going to solve the electricity problem with the human blood. I was astonished with that idea, whether it's really justified to solve the electricity problem with the human blood, whether human blood is more important or electrical issue to be solved is more important. So of course, when an individual is coming up with an idea, there must be certain justification behind it. A motivation and a justification of the proposed invention for solving the real-world practical problem. There could be several other ideas through which electricity problems can be solved rather than trying to solve it with the human blood. The LCI checklist 1 then have item number 4. And item number 4 asks about existence and intensity of problem with references to websites, news, conference proceedings, research articles, and reports. You just imagine the existence and intensity of COVID-19 today. There is a real-world practical problem, and that real-world practical problem is everywhere. So it has a very strong intensity. And as a result of that intensity, thousands of research papers have already been published on COVID-19. They've been covering social science perspective of COVID-19. They've been covering medical side of COVID-19. They've been talking about psychological perspective related to COVID-19. So there is an intensity. And because there is an intensity, the real-world practical problem needs a solution. Item number 5 of the LCI checklist 1 talks about stakeholders and their involvement in the identification of a real-world practical problem. Who are stakeholders of the research? They could be the end users, the direct customers. There may be the industrial experts, which may later on would like to buy your technology or buy your inventions and then converting into new products and services. There could be other researchers, there could be other collaborators, but at the same time, there could be federal and provincial organizations who will be related to your problem, to the invention, because without their permission, you might not be able to launch your product in the market. So let's try to understand who can be the stakeholders with the help of certain examples. I remember I was doing an interview with an academic inventor. He had spent nearly 20 years of his life in development of a technology which could be used for collection of data during the MRI process. I asked him whether his technology get commercialized or not, and he informed that unfortunately he could not come up with his company. I asked him why it happened, and he said that nearly spending 20 years of his life, he came up with a prototype which he shared with the radiologist and doctors and asked them to use it practically to learn whether this technology is of any use to them or not. He told me after a few days when he returned back to the doctors to get a feedback on his prototype, he learned the doctor said, technology is good, but we cannot use it. So we do not need your technology. I was really surprised with those comments and I asked him, how did you feel? He said he did not feel good about it. Of course, there were 20 years of his life and a lot of time and a lot of efforts and plus a lot of grants have been used to come up with this technology. I asked him what was the problem, why they said it to you. And he said they informed that In terms of collection of data, the technology is working well, but the problem is in the design. The technology was designed in a way that there were certain earpieces. And those earpieces patient had to wear when they were going through the process of MRI. So doctor informed him that in terms of collection of data, that is good. But what is happening that when they are administrating those earphones on one patient, and then when they are administrating it onto the second patient, they are about wasting 15 minutes between those two patients. And they said, we do not have this much time to be wasted while administrating his technology from one patient to the other. I asked him, okay, that you got the feedback for your design change, for your technology from the end users. Then what happened? Why you did not change the design? And after changing the design, why did you again return back to them with your new prototype? And the answer that he shared was, he said, by that time I was out of grants. It means he did not had more grants or more funding left to come up with some changes in his technology. That is the importance of involving the end users or stakeholders at the earlier phase of invention, at the earlier phase of research. That would at least give a clear picture that what the end users may need in the technology. So along with end users, the federal organization, they are also very important stakeholders for any research. Well, we know that Pfizer is asking for administration of third dosage. And for that, they need to ask FDA, which is the Food and Drug Authorities, to make it possible. An academic inventor may come up with a very good technology, with a very good invention, but because there are some regulatory requirements, so that invention might not be able to become commercialized. These kind of stakeholders and their involvement at the earlier phase of technology development and invention is very important. And item number 6 asks for the details of informal and formal meetings with maybe other academicians, with some industrial experts, maybe during some conferences, or maybe during some informal gatherings, where real-world problem may have been discussed. I remember when I was doing my master's dissertation, then along with master's dissertation, there was another project report that was also required by the students. And for that project report, our professor there established a team and he took us to a company. And the company people asked us to come up or design a collaboration model which would allow them to establish collaboration not only with their suppliers and buyers, but also with their competitors. Now, that need of an industry has never been discussed in any research paper or has never been discussed in any conference, but rather it came into being through some informal discussions. So the checklist also asks the academic inventor to look for these kind of informal discussions that held, and through these discussions, the real-world practical problem may further be explored. The checklist also asks of the LCI checklist 1 for certain associations, foundations, standards, regulations that would affect the invention in the future. I've mentioned about Food and Drug Administration Authority already. But let's talk about Federal Communication Commission and some other regulatory commission, including IEEE standards or ISO standards, that would also affect the invention if it's about to come into being. For example, if we have to administer anything on our social media, we need to make sure that it follows the Federal Communication Commission regulations. The last item of the LCI checklist 1 then talks about code of relevant industry, may be available at different websites. Let's see if we're talking about an example of US, then there are certain websites that talks about standard industry classification, North American industry classification, or any other relevant website. Maybe if we take an example of Pakistan, then Pakistan standard industry classification. Now they are in fact those groups of industries which identify the economic sectors for which the invention may be developed. So for today's video, I have shared 3 major questions that a first component of LCI, the problem identification, asks from an academic inventor or an entrepreneur, and a supportive LCI checklist 1 that if those items will be answered by the academic inventor or a researcher or an entrepreneur, then gradually the idea of real world practical problem will be polished and move them to go on with their inventions further. Let's stop today here and let's see you in episode number 4 for more hands-on activities that will support the first component of the LCI. Thank you very much.